Okay, now we'll be dealing with problems today. This is almost the equivalent of a square edge here. The angles aren't right, so you can't just start hitting this. What a lot of people do is they'll make the mistake of seeing an angle that's a proper platform, and they'll just have to hit it and try to knock the biggest thinning flake off of it they can. That's not really usually the best thing to do. This is what we have to deal with this particular spall. We've got a percussion cone here for when it was spalled off. So this ridge needs to be removed, and we need to start dealing with this right here. To remove this ridge, we're going to use a method where you will put your finger on the high spot and go down the ridge, follow a ridge to the edge, and bevel that. And what that's going to do is set up a platform. Always scratch. Then you flip it over, and line of sight and line of strike can remove that ridge. We're going to go down to the other side and do the same thing. So we've removed that entire ridge and the little cone of percussion that was here. Now we have a square edge to deal with. Square edges generally always happen the same way as far as their remedy goes. And what you do is you go to the end of the feature where it's weak, because down here at the end you just have a small amount of rock to knock off. It's weak. And so you'll do like that. You'll bevel it, you'll flip it over, and then you're going to strike right there in the face, on the face of the flake scar you just created. Then you're going to flip it over and you're going to do the same thing again. And then you're going to flip it over and you're going to do the same thing again. Then you're going to flip it over and you just walk down the entire piece this way, and eventually you have turned your edge from a square edge into this lovely thing, and it was just that simple. Now you're going to go back and you're always going to try to use the rule of targeting your next flake for the thing that sticks up highest or lowest from the center plane. So there'll be a plane running right through the middle of this thing that's going to be your eventual blade edges, and you want to keep an eye on that. And so things like this that are conspicuously high or above the center plane, that's your first target. It's a targeting discipline. So we took care of that. You notice every time I strike, I'm going to be looking for whatever the next high spot is. The next highest spot. And that would be this right here. We've got all this cortex to do, so this is what I'm going to do for this cortex. You never know. Most of the time, if you buy stone from a reputable dealer, he's not going to sell you a bunch of cortex. But what you need to do, if you do have cortex to deal with, it's good at some point to work an entire edge and then just tap that cortex off. That will reveal whatever you have on the interior of that stone that was going to surprise you if you didn't do that. So, notice how I will find a high spot. I'm still using my method. I find a high spot, I follow a ridge to the edge, and the reason you follow a ridge to the edge like that is because when a flake is coming off of a core, it has to be thicker in the middle than it is on the sides, otherwise the flake will break during removal. So I'm using basically the same rule of targeting a high spot, and I'm also making sure that in each one of my flakes that I'm removing, that there's a ridge right in the middle of that flake or somewhere on that flake that is going to allow the entire flake to come off in one piece. So here I have set up an entire edge, and I'm going to do something that you need to learn how to do. See, we've got a reasonably flat piece, but it needs this removed. Coincidentally enough, this happens to be our high spot. We can follow this convexity to the edge and remove a flake in each place, and we don't really have to have, as long as your flake scar is rounded and thicker in the middle, you don't have to have a ridge there, but it's always a good concept. So what I'm going to do is remove most of those. That's left this right here. High spot, follow it to the edge, bevel it, abrade it appropriately. And when you're a beginner, a good thing to do is go through this process and just take a pencil and draw out where your flake's going to be removed. So, as you can see, we're moving right along. Now, we have this spot down here to deal with. Conspicuously, that's the high spot, and that's another high spot. We have a square edge here. Even though it's a tiny one, we're going to have to use our same procedure. And we're going to take this, we're going to bevel that, we're going to come back and strike the face that we created. We're going to flip it over, we're going to do the same thing again. And all of a sudden, this high spot down here doesn't really exist anywhere near like it did before. Always pay attention to that center line, that center plane. It's like if this preform was a biscuit, you'd be cutting it right along the center plane, because that's where you have to remove a flake from the same side of the center plane as the flake is. In other words, you don't want to make a platform on this side to remove a flake on that side. So this center plane right here, we see these little edges. These several edges are below the center plane, and they're designed to remove those flakes. You can just go down I'm changing every time I strike. The high spot on this preform moves down a little just past my flake scar that I just created. So now this one, okay, so you look at your piece and you say to yourself, where's the high spot? What sticks up the farthest from my center plane? Because that's always, or almost always, the next spot you want to target. Okay, so I'm just going to knock a few off of this, and this will be a preform. 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. So that's pretty much a nice preform there. Ready to get started. Most of the guesswork is out of this one. It just takes execution from there.